Well, we got the new tires installed on the wheels back from the tire shop, so now we'll get to the work at hand here, pull these hubs off and grease those bearings, clean up the brakes a little bit. And see, it's a suspension, and you can see the shackles are flipped down because they don't have any weight on. They'll flip back up once I lower the fifth wheel back down off of the leveling system with the tires on. They'll flip up, and if not, then we'll make them flip up. But we'll grease everything, check the links out and everything looks good. I don't see any issues. You can see that my stuff is well greased, and for being a 2014, we're not rusted up too bad. A little bit of surface rust from a couple of toes in the wintertime on salt and on salted roads, and couldn't get them rinsed off real well, but no big deal. And we'll start by pulling the grease cover off, which I already did. And you can see it's called an easy clip, and that's what you'll have on your Dexter axles with the Easy Lube Zerk, which I don't use and I don't recommend that you use. And we can look up in here and see that we still have plenty of grease. Probably don't even need to pull these off, but we're here, so we're going to go ahead and pull them off. And I do this annually, and I'll get this off and we'll see what the brakes look like and what the bearings look like here in a minute. Okay, so I've pulled one hub off, and as you can see, the inner bearing is nice and greased, but we're still going to pop out this grease seal and re-grease it. And you can see that there's no blow-by around the edges of the back where the grease seal sits. And you can see that the outer edge where the bearing rides here and here is just fine. There's no issues there. And here's an image of the bearing. I have not cleaned it up yet, but you can see the bearings are still well lubricated. And these are the original Dexter OEM bearings, and we have about 39,000 miles on them, but we'll clean these up and repack them, both the inner and the outer, replace the seal, and we can take a look-see at the brakes, and we can see that we still have probably another year's worth, maybe two, out of these brakes. We don't see any cracks on the shoes. Everything has been wearing good. And so we'll clean those up, and I'll show you an image of all of that cleaned up before I reassemble. Before I get started, we're going to check this magnet. And here's an easy, simple way to do that. Just take your nice straight edge and lay across to the magnet from end to end. And you don't want to see any gaps underneath that straight edge. And as you can see here, the magnet is nice and straight all the way across. We're not down to the wear holes yet out in this area here, and so we have a lot of life left in the magnet. And when we look way down here, this is the self-adjusting, well, it's called never adjust, and we're looking at all the hardware, the spring, everything looks good. We don't see any issues there. Look at the wiring looks good. So now we're going to clean this up and get this bearings and stuff done, and we'll show you that here in a minute. And while the compressor builds up there, I'm running my little pancake compressor. A lot of people like to use that brake clean stuff that comes in a spray can when it comes to clean it up. I use some sandpaper. This is about 220 grit, and I take the sandpaper and just lightly rough up the brake pads, the brake shoes, as you can see me doing here, maybe. And I'll put this down for a minute. Okay, so you can see that the brake shoes have been cleaned up lightly with sandpaper. And I'm old school. I use a compressed air, and we'll blow this thing out. Stand back from it so you don't inhale anything, of course. And I'll clean it out just a little bit. Okay, so now we've got everything cleaned up. The air compressor just shut off. The brake shoes look great with 39,000 miles on them. There's no reason to think about replacing those yet. and the spindle looks good. Wiped it off and cleaned. You'll see some marks here and there, like right in there, and that's called fretting, and that's normal. You're going to see that. There's no heat discoloration, so the bearings have been doing well. The grease was good, and all of the hardware is good. The two brake return springs are good. The hold down springs that hold the brakes to the backing plate are intact and good. And the self-adjuster spring down here on the self-adjusting mechanism is all in good shape. So we're done cleaning this. Now we'll get on to taking the bearing, inner bearing out and seal, clean that, repack it, and then put this hub back on. And before I pop this old grease seal out, we'll lay the new grease seal down here and make sure that it's the right diameter, which it is. And also, if you look inside, in this edge right in here, you'll see the seal itself. I can't point to it, but it's called a double lip seal, and that's what you want. The purpose of the double lip seal is to prevent that grease from working its way out past this inner grease seal all over your brakes and everything else. So that's what you want to use, is a double lip grease seal. And I'll show you how easy it is to pop out one of these grease seals. Use is real high tech. A big long heavy screwdriver. It's stuck down underneath the metal of the grease seal. I have a block of wood here so that the screwdriver is resting on it, and then I'm going to wrap on the end of this, and it'll lift this grease seal up where it goes down into the hub itself. Okay, so we have the grease seal has been lifted up, as you can see, and we'll simply take the grease seal out, and now we're looking at the inner bearing. And we'll just reach inside and pick that inner bearing up. And as you can see, it's quite well lubed along with the race assembly. And that's what hand packing does. You get a good quality job, you know it's done right, and it's going to last for 12,000 miles easily. And now we've got the drum flipped over, and we're looking at the inner race. And there is no issues with the inner race, so we're going to hand pack these bearings and put the new grease seal on and then reinstall this hub. Okay, you can see the inner bearing is set back down inside the race. It's nice and greased. And now we're going to take the new seal and install it. And if you'll notice on the outer edge of this seal, it comes with a light red coating, and that's to help the seal, or the axle seal, prevent from any grease from coming out around the edges. So you don't need to put anything on there. Some people say you need to use Loctite and all that. I don't do that. And the way I'm going to install this seal is I take a block of wood like so, and then we'll lay down on here flat, and then we'll lightly tap this a few times with a hammer, and I'll show you when I get it started here in just a second. Okay, you can see where the seal is partially seated all the way around, and so now what we're going to do is finish tapping the seal all the way in until it's fully seated. Okay, now you can see that the edge of the metal of the seal is down flush against the hub metal itself, and it's nice and seated all the way around. So we're ready to take this hub and we'll reinstall it on the spindle, and then we'll put the outer bearing in with the washer and the easy keeper for the nut, and that'll be it. And I'll show you how to do a pre-torque on these nuts. It's an important step that a lot of guys forget to do. Okay, so now I have the hub in place. You can see the outer race is nice and clean, and all we got left to do here is pack this outer bearing. And if you notice, the grease I'm using today, it's Super Tech, and it's red. And if you look at it and you look at the specs of this grease and you look at the specs of the Lucas Red and Tacky, they are, from what I can tell, identically the same. I've been using this is my second year using this on the trailer, and I just tried a can of it just because it was there and they were out of the Red and Tacky Lucas. I do have Red and Tacky in my grease gun, but this is what we have for the wheel bearings. And if you look on here, it's high temp grease and extreme pressure. So that's what we want, is extreme pressure, because it's a wheel bearing, and we want high temp because of course the hubs and bearings and brakes and everything generate a lot of heat when it's going down the road. So now we'll get this outer bearing packed, and I'll show you just before I go to put the outer bearing on what it looks like. This next step I'm going to show you is where a lot of guys make a mistake when they grease their bearings. Okay, the nut is back on and it's finger tight as I can get it. And what I'm going to do is I'm using an old Stilson wrench, and or a Ford wrench, depends on what you want to call it. And all I'm going to do is take this wrench and we're going to tighten this nut down as tight as I can tighten it, like so. And what that does is it seats the bearing, and then now I back that nut off and you can see that it's free spinning. And then I take and I turn it as tight as I can with my fingers, and that's how you torque your axle nuts on these Dexter 7K axles with the Easy Lube, or just about any other axle. You want to preload that bearing first with some torque, and then back it off so that it's finger loose, and then snug the nut down so it's finger tight. You do not want to tighten this nut down with a wrench. Finger tight only, otherwise you're going to have bearing problems. The last two steps to do here is I've got to take and put the Easy Keeper on, and this is what it looks like. It's a yellowish color, and what it does is slides over this axle nut and keeps the axle nut from backing off. Years ago on the older axles they use a cotter pin, but they've got fancy now with this Easy Keeper, and it's kind of a pain in the butt to get back on, but basically you can see it's got a flat tab. You line the flat tab up with a flat spot on the end of the spindle of the axle, and then work the clips around so that it all goes down nice and flush. And then of course put the grease cap seal back on. So we'll get that done and show you what it looks like. Okay, we have the Easy Keeper nut retainer back on, and you can see the edges of it are flush against the nut, and so this nut cannot back off. And if we sit here and try to work it, it's not going to come off. And you can see that the axle nut is in fact finger tight, and that's what you want to have. And so now we'll wipe this dust cap off and reinstall it, and we're done with the first hub, and that leaves me 3 to go. And now we have the hub back on, and this rubber plug, which you would pull off if you were going to use the Dexter Easy Lube feature on the end of the axle, which I highly recommend you don't do. We're looking at that, and it's not cracked or broke or anything. If these are broke, you can get these plugs at just about any automotive store. But this one is 8 years old, 9 years old now, still looks good. All of the threads on all of the studs look good, and so we won't have any problem retorquing the new tire. And boy, these Salins look nice. They should be a real good tire for many years for us. Okay, again we have the left front hub back installed. We've greased all of the fittings, and you can see that everything is greased. And don't forget there's 2 grease fittings up inside there, and we've greased back here. We've looked at the links on this side, and this is OEM equipment, folks. 39,000 miles, and there's no wear. So there's what proper maintenance will do for you. We've just pulled the left rear hub off. We can tell that there's been no blow-by on the grease seal, which is what we don't want to see. And a quick look-see at the brake shoes before I've cleaned them. And you can see that this set of brake shoes looks as good as the other. And we're looking at all the magnet hardware, and everything is intact and in place, and we don't see any issues. So we will be ready here in a minute to clean this up, and we'll pull the grease seal off of this hub, pull that bearing out, inspect it, clean it, grease it, new bearing, reinstall the hub. And I've wiped this outer bearing down, and again, I don't wash my bearings with solvent, gasoline, or anything else. I wipe all the grease out from here, and then I hand pack from this side, and whatever grease that's still remaining gets pushed out this side. When I see nice fresh grease all the way around, I know that I have displaced all of the old grease. I have fresh grease in there, and I don't have to worry about any solvent. And you can take a look-see at these bearings. Again, these are the original Dexter OEM bearings, 39,000 miles, 9 years now. This will be the 9th year of use, and there is no reason to replace these bearings. Every day on a lot of the different forums, I see people say, oh, well, you got to put Timken bearings on there and all that. Well, if you got a lot of money to spend and you just got to have new bearings, nothing wrong with it. I prefer to get my money's worth out of things that I purchase, and I take care of them, and the proof is in the pudding, they'll last. So that's a decision that you'll have to make. So I'm going to have me a quick coffee break and then get on with this left rear, and then get over to the right side, because the wife is making homemade enchiladas today with some leftover turkey that we smoked a couple of days ago, and I'll be getting a dinner call on it here in a few hours, and I don't want to be late for that. So we'll show you a couple of shots on the other side just to show you what each brake and hub looked like when I pulled it off. And other than that, that's pretty much what there is to doing the job yourself, DIY. That's what I like to do. Give you a second look. This is the left rear, and you can see that the race looks great. And we've got this axle all cleaned up. The brake shoes have been brushed up a little bit with a little sandpaper. The spindle and everything looks good. And we've got the two bearings cleaned, and we'll grease those and put this all back together, and then we'll be done with the left side. But just wanted to show you that. I won't show the right side. I think it would just be redundant, but that kind of gives you an overview of how easy this is to do if you have a few mechanical skills and a few tools. You can see what we're using here. Nothing high tech, and of course I do have a torque wrench laying here, some jack stands if I thought I needed them for safety reasons, but I'm not going to be up underneath here with the tires off. The 6-point level up it supports the system just fine. Each side of your level up system is rated at about 38,000 pounds, 14,000 pounds for the front leveler, and either 8 or 10 for each one of these mid and rear levelers. So rough math, I'll say that's 38,000 pounds of lift capacity per side. So if you don't have any hydraulic leaks and you're on a good stable level surface, which as you can see here that we are on a nice concrete pad, it's got a few years of cracks in it here and there, but it's fairly level and all in one piece. So we'll go put this all back together and get started on the right hand side. Okay, so we have both hubs on. Everything is done on this side, and then we'll put these brand new Salem tires on here, and then we'll hurry up and get going on the other side. If I don't get the other side done in time and the wife has to hold up the dinner, I might get dog food for dinner tonight. Who knows? Nah, she wouldn't do that to me. But we'll get on the second side there, and if there's anything of interest to show you folks, I'll shoot a video on the second side. Otherwise, what you've seen on the left side applies the same on the right hand side. And again, exercise caution and think about where you're going to put your body and your hands and your feet and things when you have the Alpine lifted up and the tires off. Safety comes first before anything else. Okay, I wanted to show you one last video. All of the tires are on, and if you remember, you saw that these shackles were flipped over because I had the tires lifted off the ground on both sides, and when you do that, these shackles right up here will sometimes flip down, and then when I lowered this back down, you can see that the shackles have flipped back over to where they're supposed to be, and I checked the other side and they're where they're supposed to be. So we have all the tires are on now. We've retracted the mid and the rear levelers, and I'm gonna torque these tires, or excuse me, torque these wheel nuts using a 3-step sequence torque. And then when I get done with that, then we'll do an auto level because obviously with me using manual level, I have this thing anything but level, so we'll do a new auto level. But that wraps it up. The other side of the Alpine looked great on the wheel bearings. Didn't see any issues with the wheel bearings or the brakes. The new tires are on, and now we just got to get the torque wrench out, finish that job, and then get all the tire covers on. Remember folks, those tire covers are super important. They will make your tires last so much longer, and you'll be a much happier camper. Well, there you go. That's all you get today from the Alpine guy, and we'll show you an F-15 flying by.